everybody, welcome. My name is Rachel and I'm UCU's Research Officer. I'm here today with Ed Bailey, who's Deputy Head of Campaigns, to talk about running online surveys in your branches. So it's potentially a really big topic, and also I'm aware that people's levels of experience and confidence is going to be really different, but hopefully this will be a useful introduction, whatever your level of experience, and give you some ideas about how you can use surveys to help organise and campaign within your branches. So just to give you a bit of an overview of the structure of the session, Ed is going to start us off by talking about what online surveys can be used for, and also go through some of the survey platforms that are available to use. And then I'm going to talk through sort of designing a survey and then how to use the results. Before we get started, I wanted to briefly mention GDPR because it's something that always comes up when we do these kind of events, and obviously it could be a whole session in and of itself, and a really detailed discussion about it is kind of beyond the scope of today. I'll go through a few bits as they come up, but broadly I'd say to kind of wait until you're running a survey, and if you have a specific query then definitely get in touch via your regional team and we'll be able to advise you more about that. But like, yeah, don't worry too much about it, especially before you've sort of started doing anything. So I think I'll hand over to Ed now, who's going to start us off.
So yeah, I'm Ed Bailey from the campaigns team at UCU, work at head office, and I've been with UCU since formation, and before that NatFi. So I'm likely to have worked with many of you on your campaigns, maybe preparing surveys, e-ballots, and running elections for you. Consulting and communicating with our survey software has become a big part of our work in recent years, and especially during the current pandemic crisis, where we can't meet in person. In the current circumstances, we're relying heavily on our digital organising, using our social media platforms and our survey and e-ballot software tools. So I'm going to talk to you about why we use surveys, how we use them in the National Office, and also how you can use them in your workplace, and also take you through some of the features of the different platforms that are available. So in the National Office, we run surveys to collect opinions and information about our members and about the sector where we organise. And these are presented to the participants in terms of an online form containing different question types that you'll be familiar with, such as multiple choice, drop-down selections, free text, and so on. We also conduct electronic consultations with members, commonly known as e-ballots. These are usually a multiple choice question with a binary option, such as do you accept or reject management's proposals, or whatever it is. Now, these are not industrial action ballots. Those have to be conducted by post, by law. These are to inform our decision making or to decide on non-statutory matters. We also run elections for branch officer roles or committee elections, and we may have done those for you in the past. Those are the main ways that we use the software, but also really anything that needs involves collecting information electronically. So we might just use them for registering for events, collecting lists of volunteers, or a simple petition. So they're extremely useful tools for trade union organising, particularly at the moment when it's very hard to talk to colleagues face to face on campus in our colleges and universities. I'm sure many of you already use this technology in your day jobs. We have, amongst our membership, we have many researchers, statisticians and others who use, or in your teaching, I'm sure that we use these regularly, but it's kind of perhaps a slightly different way that we use it in a trade union context to you may be used to using in your day jobs. And we can do have some capacity for running these for you, for branches, running surveys and e-ballots for priority campaigns, but do talk to your regional office in the first instance. Otherwise, hopefully this session will give you some pointers about using surveys for yourselves. And we hope you find this useful. So I'll move on to using surveys in your branch. Now, why should you use surveys in your trade union activities? So one reason is to find out what matters to members. So in order to effectively represent members, we need a good understanding of their working lives and the issues that they want the union to campaign on and indeed negotiate on. So we have members in a range of roles in different parts of college and university organisations, and it's just not possible for a branch committee just in themselves to to understand everything that's going on in an organisation. Another issue is where you have split campuses, and surveys are a good way of getting an overview of what's taking place in your workplace. Also, it shows we're listening. It's important that we demonstrate to our members, and also crucially to colleagues who are not yet in the union, that we understand and accurately represent their concerns at work. Workers don't join or get involved unless they feel we speak for them. So showing we're listening is important. We also use it for decision making. We can use surveys to work out what members want us to do. That could be a simple multiple choice. Do you want us to accept this deal? Or it might be electing your branch committee. It also can be used to strengthen our hand in negotiations. So we often use surveys to back up our arguments with management and to illustrate the depth of feeling or the prevalence of an issue at work. So if we go to our college manager to negotiate on workload, for example, it can be much more persuasive if we can show that the majority of staff are overworked, and that's why the college should take action, and so on. So it helps us to demonstrate that what we're arguing for is widely felt, and and we can illustrate that with statistics and by demonstrating how our members feel about issues at work. So for supporting the key functions of trade unions, representation, campaigning, negotiating, and indeed recruiting new members, I think surveys are very useful for trade union branches. So I'm just going to move on now to looking at the different platforms that are available when you come to choose a survey platform. There's a lot of software out there, and there's a wide variety of different types with different things that I think you should look out for. I'm going to talk you through those now. So some of the things to look out for are limits on the number of surveys that you can create with that platform, as well as limits on the number of questions, and crucially, I think the number of participants. So many of the free versions of survey software have a limit on all those, and that can be that can affect your choice which platform you choose, depending on, for example, how many members you have in your branch. Whether or not this platform will be suitable for you. Customer support, many of them offer telephone support 24/7 or email support. That again varies from platform to platform, and whether or not you have the free version or the paid for version. Whether or not you can customize your survey, make it look UCU branded, include our logo or your own color themes and so on. That varies as well. The types of questions available. Some surveys offer what we call conditional questions, which mean you would say something like, do you work in the library, yes or no. If you put no, then you move on to the next one. If you put yes, then questions about working in the library might pop up. So that's what we call conditional questions. And some surveys offer that, others don't. Data export options. When you finish your survey, what format do you want to pull off the data and scrutinize the information that you've collected? That might be in Excel, or it might be PDF or Word. That's worth looking for when you're making that decision as to which software platform you want to use. Anonymous response options is quite an important one as well, because not all of the survey platforms out there have the option to request anonymity. And as Rachel mentioned, there's everything we do has to be covered by GDPR. So do take a look at that. It's also important for ballots, obviously, secret ballots where you know, you don't want the participants' response to be shown, for example. And of course, cost is always an important factor. I know some branches have funds available. You have local funds, others don't. So that will be something to consider when you look at whether or not you choose the free or the paid version. So I'll take you through some of the platforms that are out there now. This is the one that we use in head office, called SurveyGizmo. We've used this for a couple of years now. I find it a really good tool, powerful tool, and it has stood us in good stead without too many issues with this one. Some of the features are the free version is limited to 100 responses. So if you're in a big branch, more than 100 members, it might not be appropriate for you to go for the free version, because you're going to need more participants than that. The standard paid version starts at £20 a month, and that has unlimited responses and unlimited questions as well. I found the customer support's pretty good on that. Yeah, as I say, it's the one we use at head office, so it's pretty good. And I can, if you do decide to go with that one, obviously, you can ask questions. I'll be able to quickly answer most questions about this one, as well as the support that comes with SurveyGizmo. I'll move on to the next one. Surveymonkey is very similar to SurveyGizmo. This is one we used previously. You'll see some of the features there. It's slightly more expensive. It gives you those unlimited number of surveys and unlimited questions, and the email support is good. That's UK based as well, that one, which sometimes matters if you've got a problem and you need to speak to a real life person. Some of the platforms are from other countries, so obviously the time zones are different, working hours are different as well. SurveyMonkey's another good option for you, though. Google Forms is one that's widely used at the moment in our sector. It's a free platform, and there are no limits on the number of responses you want to collect. It doesn't have the option to brand your survey, and there are some other limitations on your output options as well. So take a look at Google Forms, because it's got, crucially, it's got no limit on the number of participants, and it's fairly easy to use as well. Microsoft Forms is offered, it's very similar via Office 365, so those are two that you might want to consider. JISC is an option that that many branches I know have used in the past. It's a not-for-profit UK-based one that's specifically designed for the further and higher education sectors. So they provide online survey tools, and they are designed for academic research and for education and public sector organisations. So they also offer unlimited surveys and responses. It's a little bit cheaper than some of the other options as well. So for a single user, that starts at £16 a month, and there's a free trial for that one as well. There are links to all these software packages at the end of this. I'll share the link to these slides so that you can take a look at these in your own time as well. Finally, I've put one up here, Survey Legend. It's much the same as SurveyMonkey and SurveyGizmo, but the free version has unlimited responses and questions. So, but unfortunately, that one's limited to only 3 surveys. So it's good for infrequent users if you have a large branch or a large number of people that you want to survey. So I think those are all the platforms that I'll take you through. I will post just now the link to my slides for that in case that's helpful. So I think that's all I'll say for now on that. Now I've bored you all into submission. I'll hand you over to Rachel. Over to you, Rachel.
Fab. Okay. Thank you, Ed. That was really helpful. So I'm going to talk a bit to start with about designing a survey, starting with some general principles. So these are basically to make things easier for yourself and for whoever is analysing the results. So the most important thing is, like, don't start with the questions, start with what it is that you need to know. So thinking about what, like, the purpose of the survey is, as Ed talked about, it's really tempting to say, let's do a survey and response and then jump in writing questions kind of immediately, but it will make the results much more useful, and also whoever's analysing the results' life much easier, which is often me. Just so to start by thinking about what it is that you need from the survey. I'll give some examples of that later on as well. So the second point is only collect the data you need. So use question routing. So this is what Ed was talking about, conditional questions to help with that. So only asking people follow-up questions if they need to be asked. And this is like good practice from, like, a data protection point of view, kind of minimizing what you're asking, only asking what you need, and also means people are more likely to complete the full survey rather than sort of getting bored partway through. Yeah, and on the same vein, keep the survey as short as possible, and try and keep the survey on topic, so for a single purpose. And again, it's just likely to make your survey flow better and also make people much more likely to do the survey and do surveys from you in future, not think, oh gosh, another UCU survey is going to go on forever. So that's what I'd say on designing the survey. I'm now going to talk a little bit about types of questions that you can use in a survey and when it might be useful or not to use them. So the simplest question type is like a multiple choice question, which can allow either single or multiple answers. So for example, what department you work in would have a single answer, but something like what type of contract do you have might have a single or multiple answer. So for example, if you're asking, do you have like a fixed term or permanent contract, you'd want people to be able to just pick one of those answers. But if you are asking about all kinds of different contract types, so variable hours contracts, or hopefully not, but possibly 0 hours contracts, people might be on a permanent variable hours contract or a fixed term variable hours contract. So it's important to think quite carefully about whether a question should have like multiple or single responses. Hope that makes sense. And then, yes, and those questions are generally really easy and quick for people to answer and also really quick to analyse. So that's a good type of question to go for. The second type of question is ranking questions. So this is where you ask respondents to order different options according to preference, and you'd use that to show the relative preference of different options. I'm going to go for an example later, but that would be, I don't know, if you had like multiple things up for negotiation and you wanted to know what was more important to people, you'd use a ranking question for that. They're quite time consuming to answer and to analyse, just because there's kind of quite a lot of sort of thinking involved. So that's just something to bear in mind. You don't want to do a question where you have like lots of ranking questions, a survey, sorry, where you have lots of ranking questions. Okay, and then next slide, thanks Ed. So another type of question that you could use is a rating or Likert scale question. So that's when you have like strongly agree, agree, neither agree nor disagree, that kind of scale. Or you could just have a kind of rating on numbers, sort of 1 to 10 or whatever. And that's used to kind of gauge people's strength of opinion about something. And you can use a matrix, so like a list of lots of different questions. I'm sure you've all done surveys where you're kind of doing lots of agree, strongly agree, disagree. So you can use, it's called a matrix, where you use several of those questions together. It can be quite time consuming to answer. And another thing to think about with those is they often like don't display that well on mobile devices. But again, if that's the kind of questions you need to answer, then that's something that's available to you. The next type of question is one I've got mixed feelings about, as someone who has to analyse lots of surveys, are free text or open-ended questions. So what these are really, really useful for is when you want qualitative examples of something. So you want people to, in this context, maybe like describe how something is affecting them, or talk about the kind of like impact of proposed contractual changes or something, what that would mean to them and their lives. So can be really useful if you want to get quotes for a press release or a campaign that are sort of talking about people's experiences that you, or Ed, something's happened with the slides, but I'm going to carry on anyway. Oh, that's much better. Yeah, so free text questions can be useful for when you kind of want more of a feel of something. But what I would say is they are very, very time consuming to analyse, especially if you have a lot of respondents. So only think about whether it's possible to use a multiple choice question instead with another option, if you can think about the kind of things that people might answer to a question. Because what you don't want is to ask a free text question and then come back with the same thing, spelt all kinds of different ways, written slightly differently, and then it's just a pain for whoever is analysing, whoever's analysing that. And something to say on that is if you are designing a survey that you want to use for press or campaign work, definitely get in touch with the press team. You can do that via your regional team, and they'll be happy to advise on ways that you can use a survey to kind of get maximum impact that way. So then the final thing is demographic questions. These can be really useful for understanding the equality impact of something. But obviously, again, for data protection reasons, like only collect it if you're actually going to use this data. An example would be asking about gender. You might want to, I guess, if you're talking about, I don't know, caring responsibilities and going back to work, that might be something that could impact women more. So you might want to ask about that. But do note that some demographics, so for example, race, ethnicity, and trade union membership are special category data in GDPR. So if you are going to use those, then like definitely speak to your regional team, and maybe and we can kind of advise you on that if you do have any concerns. Okay, so I think that is it on types of question. Onto my next slide. So I am going to talk about a couple of examples on the survey design process. So you have to excuse if they're kind of a bit clunky examples. Hang on, I'm just checking. I'm not sure if this is the right version of my slides, but that is fine. I'm going to talk through a different example first, and then I'll talk through the example that's on screen. So the example that I'm going to talk through is that your branch exec needs to prioritise several issues that are in quite an early stage of negotiation. So maybe you put in a claim which has multiple different elements, and you want to know what to prioritise or what to emphasise within your negotiations. So the bold questions are the same. So these are things that you have to think about. So firstly, what information do you already have? You don't want to ask things that you already know. So in the scenario where you're trying to prioritise different issues. You already know from some members, so from within the branch exec, maybe with some more active members or your own colleagues, what people's priority issues are. And then the next question is, what information do you need from the survey? So what don't you have already? And in the example that I'm talking about, what you don't have is opinions from like a wide range of members on the relative priorities. So for example, there might be particularly isolated members that you want to hear their opinions, or perhaps casual aid staff are like less able to be involved in some of your meetings and you need to make sure that you're including them in your prioritization. Or maybe you have like multiple campuses or sites and you feel like less connected with how people on like another site feel. So while you're aware of kind of relative priorities within your own immediate networks, you want to make sure that you're like canvassing the opinions of the whole branch. And then the next question, the next thing to think about then so you've already thought about what information you already have, what information you need from the survey, and then you can think about some question ideas and what it would be useful to kind of include in the survey. So this is just the principle that I said at the beginning, that rather than jumping straight into questions, like it's really, really worth spending time thinking through what you want from the survey right at the beginning. And obviously, like, we're more than happy to help with that if that's useful. So some question ideas if you're trying to rank issues. So it would be useful to be able to segment members into different groups to check that you're kind of like getting opinions from the people that you're worried that maybe you aren't. So you could have a drop down to select your department or your role or different demographic questions, just so when you get the results, you can check that you're not just getting the results again from the people you already know what their priorities are. You're kind of managing to cast your net a bit wider. So those would be questions to include. Secondly, you want to know what the relative priority of issues within the claim is. So you'd use like a ranking question for that with all the different, in this example, the different things that you've included, the different items, and you can ask people to rank those. And then you'd want to sort of think about what's the strength of opinion on each issue, like how deeply do people feel about the different issues that you put in your claim. And you could use a Likert scale, so a strongly disagree, agree question, or another way of rating the different things that you're talking about. So I'm sorry that the slides weren't there for that bit, but maybe if you can go back, Ed, to the previous slide before this, and I'll go through. Yes, perfect. Sorry about that. This is the second example that I was going to talk about, which is a bit different. So hopefully the first one kind of, well, for me, the first one is a bit more straightforward. You're thinking about what you need to get and you're getting it. But the thing that I worked in research before this, and this kind of survey is quite different. So if you are a researcher, you have to throw some things out of the window for this part, because it's about collecting data for influencing and campaigning. So it might feel a bit uncomfortable as you're essentially starting with the results that you want to get in order to demonstrate what you know that your members are experiencing. You haven't just made it up, but you're starting from the results you want and trying to figure out how to create them or how to show them. So it's a bit of a different process. I'm just going to have a drink. So in this scenario, management are proposing job cuts which are affecting casual aid staff, and the branch is planning a local anti-job cuts campaign. So it's the same sort of things that I was talking through before. So what information do you already have? You already have data from management on the number of casual aid staff that will be affected by their proposals. You can get data on the total number of staff at your institution and the number of staff that are on casual contracts from HESA if you're in HE, or you can ask us or ask your regional office and they're able to give you data, in fact, for both HE and FE, on the number of staff that are affected by this. So don't ask about those things in the survey because that's information that you can get elsewhere, and you want to keep your survey for information that you need to ask members about. And then the second thing, so the next slide, is what do you need from the survey, thinking about what the information is that you have already. So you need to show management that members on all types of contracts care really deeply about these proposed job cuts, that it's not something that they can just, you know, slip through and that people will forget about, that it's something that across the institution people care deeply. And secondly, you need to be able to illustrate the impact of the proposed cuts on those affected and any staff that aren't directly affected by that too. And you want to do this in order to be able to show management in negotiations that it's not something that they can get away with and it is something that's really important. And also you can use these in any sort of local like press work or campaigning across the institution. So that's what you need from the survey. And then on to the next slide, which is talking about some question ideas for if you want to show that. Okay, so you need to be able to identify and segment which members are on casual contracts and which members are on secure contracts, to be able to show that it's like a cross-institutional issue. So you can also ask, the questions that you'd ask to do that would be like a multiple choice demographic question about contract type. You could also ask questions that are about kind of what department are you in, or what job role do you have, again, to show that these things are like very like widely felt. It's not a sort of small issue. And then if you're thinking what you want to be able to say is that X% of members think these proposed cuts are the biggest issue at our institution, you need to ask members to rank current issues and show that they think is more important than X, Y, and Z. So basically it's thinking about, these are just examples, there could be other things that you want to say and that make more sense for you, but the idea is that you start with what is it that you want to be able to say to management, what is it that you want to be able to put in a press release, and then work out what questions to ask from that, which, as I said, feels might feel a bit funny, a funny way around of doing it, but if you're doing this to influence and campaign, that's definitely the way around to do it. So another example, if you want to say that X% of members strongly disagree with this proposal, or X% of members think job cuts will negatively impact on the remaining staff workload, well-being, student experience, whatever it is that you think management will listen to, even if they aren't the things that you think are important. You can, and press as well, and the media, and you could ask these Likert scale questions, so strongly agree and disagree. And again, sometimes it feels a bit uncomfortable because you're thinking about what's going to have an impact rather than necessarily so basically you're framing it with what is going to have an impact with management, what's going to have an impact in the media, rather than using that as your starting point. Sorry, I hope that makes sense. Great. So yes, the next bit. So I'm going to just talk really briefly about data analysis and presentation of your results once you've designed your fantastic survey and run it and hopefully got a lot of responses. So if you're an Excel or data person, that is fantastic and you will find this really straightforward. But if not, please don't worry, because all the platforms that Ed mentioned have really good, like, built-in straightforward analysis options to help you out. So you can either use built-in reports, which they all have, and I think on the next slide I've got an example, but I'll just talk through this first. Or you can like download just like a list of basically all the data, a spreadsheet of all the results that people have had, if you either want to do the analysis yourself, or for some questions it's probably easier to do it yourself. So these built-in reports are similar across platforms. They generate charts to show responses to each question. It's very easy to quickly share results. You can just like copy and paste the chart. It's not always possible to customize or choose a different chart if the platform has chosen one which isn't quite what you want to show, but it's a really good kind of like starting point for looking at your results. I think on the next slide, I've got an example, so just from another survey, which is just a demographic question of select your discipline. And this is from SurveyGizmo, which, as Ed said, is the one that we use. And it's just, you don't have to do any work. It's really nice. You can just like run your survey, click report, and it will generate something like this for you for each question. So if you're not a data or Excel person, don't worry, it basically does a version of it for you, which is fantastic. And so then the next slide, this is if you want to do basically, so if either the platform has generated something which isn't quite what you want, or for some questions, so for like free text questions, it's kind of easier to, there isn't really a chart to look at them. You need to kind of like just wade through them really and pick out what's useful for whatever purposes you want to use it for. But with all the platforms that Ed mentioned, you can download this file and analyze it in Excel, which hopefully either some of you are really confident using or someone in your branch definitely will be able to and could well enjoy it. So yeah, you should be able to analyze things that way if the report doesn't work for you, or if you want something a bit different, or to like brand it or emphasize something else. And I think on the next slide, I've just got, this is just again an example in Excel of looking through free text responses for something. Great. So I think that's it. It's a bit of a funny place to end, but hopefully that's been like a useful overview of how you could use online surveys in your branch. Hopefully it's given you some ideas and starting points, and we've got plenty of time for questions. So Ed is now back, and we can get started on those, I think.
Yeah, we have, well, just for now, we have one comment and one question. So the question's for you, Rachel. Can you share your slides?
Yes, easy question.
Yeah. We'll post those up. Thank you, Anna. We'll post up the slides to this broadcast. And the very helpful suggestion come from UCU Lincoln branch regarding the limits on participants in surveys. For example, the SurveyMonkey or SurveyGizmo one's limited to 100. Their suggestion is that they use the free version, but divide their membership into groups of 100. They copy the survey over, change one word in the title, and each time use the 100 responses. So as a way of kind of surveying more than 100, but still the free version. So I think that's very helpful.
It's very creative. I like it. Good way to get around it. Probably shouldn't say that.
Thank you very much for that. Now we don't have any more questions posted, but we can, if things occur to you after the event, please do get in touch, and we can. I'm sure between me and Rachel, we can answer any of your questions.
We had a couple of pre-prepared ones. Should we do those? Or?
Yes. Yeah, let's do that. You just get those up.
By pre-prepared, I don't mean we made them up. I mean, we asked on and a few people sent questions in.
Right, here's one. So, what are the best practices for running all staff, including non-members, surveys, so as to improve union visibility in your institution?
Okay, yeah, so I had a thought about this. Basically, it's a really great idea. I don't know if people in the comments want to talk about their experience of doing it. That would be really helpful. But it can be particularly useful if there's like a current issue going on that you think across the institution, not just within members, people will be really like feeling that and looking for somewhere to kind of like direct their feeling. And I think, as Ed mentioned before, it can be a useful way to show that like the union's listening, and that would be like the purpose of that sort of survey. The things I would say would be definitely use one of the options where you can use a branded survey if you're trying to like engage people outside of your membership. And in most of the surveys, as well as questions, you can kind of like insert bits of text, so try and get across what the branch is already doing or is planning on doing, and how people can feed into that. So kind of, I would use it as like a sort of like, yeah, advertising, visibility rate, awareness raising opportunity. A challenge to using it like a survey as a direct recruitment tool is that it's quite hard to ask about whether people are members or not, because that's like particularly sensitive information. It's like a special category of information in GDPR. So the consent process for asking that is a bit more strict. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but just obviously if you have any questions, ask about that first, and we can come up with a way of asking that that's like compliant. Probably the easiest thing to do is if you want to ask, like get people to join, encourage, use it as a recruitment tool, is to just include a joining link somewhere in the survey, and obviously members can just skip that step. But if anyone, like, pop it in the comments if you have experience of doing that yourself, and there's anything that you want to add. But obviously that's a fantastic, it's like a survey is a great way of engaging people, because people like, obviously everyone wants to be listened to and heard, and a survey is a great way to show that UCU and your branch is doing that.
Rachel, someone's asked a supplementary question to that, UCU Lincoln. Are you allowed to survey non-members? Now, I think we should probably say you need to check your employer's email usage policy, as well as the recognition agreement that they have with the union, whether or not that allows you to use the your employer's email facilities to contact staff. So that's the answer, is that it will depend on your employer's email usage policy, and also the recognition agreement that you have between the union and the employer.
Yeah, and again, I know, like, said it a million times, don't let anything like that dissuade you from sort of like contacting us and trying and seeing if you want any help to figure out like what's allowed and what's possible. Then someone will be able to help with that, because I know that, yeah, nationally with like some surveys we send out beyond members, so obviously, yeah, depends, but yeah, that's such, you need to be careful.
Other questions? One, what are the best ways of ensuring surveys are used effectively as bargaining tools?
I feel like I've sort of covered that in the example that I gave, but again, to reiterate, like, before you start writing questions or sending anything out, like think about what it is that you need to demonstrate and show and give evidence for within negotiations, and like where do you think having additional evidence to like bolster your case would really help, and design your questions based around that. I hope that's helpful. I think, yeah, that's what I'd say on using surveys as part of bargaining.
Thanks, Rachel. And then finally, someone has asked about whether they've joined us late. Will this be available after the event? And the answer is yes. You can view the whole thing again on YouTube or Facebook. So just use the same link, and you can watch it again once the broadcast is ended.
Yeah, and especially I'd say if you get to a point where you think, oh, we'd really like to run a survey, obviously like watch it back and also get in touch, because sometimes it can be hard to think of questions until you're in the moment doing it and you're like, oh, that's something that I'd really like to know. So like, this isn't the only opportunity, of course. Like, if you want to run a survey, then we'd both be really happy to help. So probably best to get in touch like with the regional office, and we'll happily help you with, yeah, whatever it is that you need to do.
Okay, I think that's all the questions that we've had, Rachel.
Fab. Okay. So I guess thanks everybody for joining us today. I think it was a good session. And yeah, get in touch a million times if you have any more questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and see you soon.